celestial body humans have actually walked upon, the closest cosmic neighbor we possess, will never, ever become our second home? What if everything you have been told about lunar colonies and moon bases and humanity's future among the stars has been built upon a foundation of wishful thinking rather than scientific reality? What if the very place we conquered 50 years ago remains forever unconquerable as a place to actually live? Tonight, I want to take you on a journey that will fundamentally transform how you see that familiar face in the night sky. We're going to dive deep into the terrifying science, the brutal physics, the unforgiving biology, and the cold economics that make permanent lunar habitation not just difficult, not just challenging, but functionally impossible for human beings. This is not a pessimistic exploration. This is a realistic one. And by the end of our time together, you will understand space colonization at a level that most people, including many who consider themselves space enthusiasts, simply never reach. But before we begin this cosmic journey into truth, I need you to do something for me. Take a moment right now to hit that like button if you have ever looked up at the moon and wondered what it would be like to stand on its surface, to build a home there, to watch Earth rise over a lunar horizon. Subscribe to this channel if you want to understand the universe not through fantasy, but through the magnificent lens of actual science. And drop a comment below right now telling me whether you believe humans will ever live permanently on the moon. I will be reading your answers, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you will have the knowledge to answer that question with the confidence of a space scientist. Now, let me begin by painting a picture in your mind. Imagine standing on the lunar surface right now. You are wearing a spacesuit that cost more than most people's houses, breathing recycled air, surrounded by absolute silence because there is no atmosphere to carry sound. Beneath your boots is a grey, powdery surface that has remained essentially unchanged for billions of years. Above you stretches the blackest black you have ever seen, punctuated by stars that do not twinkle because there is no air to make them shimmer, and there, hubba hanging in the void like a blue and white marble, is Earth, your home, the only place in the known universe where you can take off your helmet and simply breathe. This is not science fiction. This is where 12 human beings have actually stood. Between 1969 and 1972, NASA's Apollo program achieved what many considered impossible, landing humans on the moon and returning them safely to Earth. Neil Armstrong's first steps, Buzz Aldrin's boot prints, the flags planted in lunar soil, these images are burned into humanity's collective memory as monuments to what we can achieve. But here is the question nobody seems to ask loudly enough. If we could send humans to the moon over 50 years ago, if we could walk on its surface and drive vehicles across its terrain and hit golf balls in its weak gravity, why did we stop? Why are there no lunar cities? Why does no human being live on the moon today? The simple answer is that visiting a place and living in a place are separated by a chasm so vast it might as well be infinite. An astronaut spending a few days on the moon accepts temporary risks that would become permanent death sentences for anyone trying to actually inhabit that world. What the Apollo missions proved, far more than proving we could reach the moon, is that the moon is spectacularly, comprehensively, and perhaps permanently hostile to human life. Let me give you some numbers that will haunt your dreams. The moon's surface temperature during the lunar day can reach 127 degrees Celsius. Hot enough to boil water instantly. Hot enough to cook you alive inside any structure that could not maintain perfect thermal regulation. But wait 14 Earth days, just 2 weeks, for the sun to set, and that same surface plummets to negative 173 degrees Celsius, colder than any natural temperature ever recorded on Earth. Cold enough to freeze your blood solid in seconds, cold enough to turn metal brittle and crack it like glass. That is a temperature swing of 300 degrees Celsius. 300 degrees. There is no place on Earth, no desert, no polar region, no extreme environment that experiences anything remotely comparable. And this cycle repeats endlessly. Every 29.5 Earth days, the moon completes one full rotation, meaning every location on its surface experiences 14 days of brutal burning sunlight followed by 14 days of absolute freezing darkness. No atmosphere distributes heat, no ocean moderates temperature. No clouds provide shade or insulation. Every single structure, every piece of equipment, every life support system on the moon must be engineered to survive this relentless thermal assault. Cycle after cycle, year after year, decade after decade, with zero margin for error. But temperature is only the beginning of the moon's hostility. Let me tell you about something the Apollo astronauts called the most challenging aspect of lunar exploration. Something that destroyed equipment worth millions of dollars in mere hours. Something that NASA scientists today still do not know how to adequately address. I am talking about lunar dust, and it is unlike anything that exists on Earth. On Earth, wind and water wear down rock particles over millions of years, smoothing their edges, rounding their shapes, making dust that flows and settles and can be swept away. The moon has no wind. The moon has no water. Lunar dust particles have remained unchanged since ancient meteorite impacts shattered lunar rock billions of years ago. These particles are not rounded. They are not smooth. They are jagged, sharp, angular fragments of glass and silicate that cut and tear at a microscopic level. Under an electron microscope, lunar dust looks like broken glass mixed with tiny hooks and barbs. And this dust does not just sit quietly on the surface. The moon's environment creates powerful electrostatic charges that make these razor-sharp particles cling to everything they touch with supernatural persistence. Apollo astronaut Harrison Schmitt experienced what he called lunar hay fever after dust infiltrated his suit and habitat, causing his sinuses to swell and his throat to constrict. Gene Cernan, the last human to walk on the moon, reported that lunar dust was the primary problem on the lunar surface. It got into everything, coated every seal, scratched every visor, degraded every mechanical joint. Now imagine not 3 days of exposure, but 30 years. Imagine trying to maintain air seals when microscopic glass shards work their way into every gasket and O-ring. Imagine trying to keep solar panels clean when charged particles cling to their surfaces with almost magnetic tenacity. Imagine breathing air that, no matter how carefully filtered, contains some percentage of particles so small they penetrate the deepest regions of your lungs, particles so sharp they slice into delicate alveolar tissue. Particles so foreign your immune system has never evolved to process them. Scientists comparing lunar dust to terrestrial silica dust, the kind that causes silicosis in miners, believe lunar dust could be significantly more dangerous. Coal miners who develop black lung disease often worked for decades before symptoms appeared. What would lunar dust do to lungs over decades of constant exposure? Nobody knows. Nobody wants to find out. But I have not yet told you about the moon's greatest invisible killer, the form of death that would find you no matter how well your habitat's seals held, no matter how clean your air systems remained, no matter how perfect your thermal regulation operated. I am talking about radiation, the cosmic rain of high-energy particles that would slowly, invisibly, unstoppably destroy your body from the inside out. To understand why radiation makes the moon uninhabitable, you first need to understand what protects us here on Earth. Our planet possesses two shields against cosmic radiation, and both of them are absolutely miraculous. First, Earth generates a powerful magnetic field through the churning of its liquid iron core, a field that extends thousands of kilometers into space and deflects the vast majority of charged particles streaming from the sun and from deep space. Second, Earth's atmosphere, that thin blue line visible from orbit, absorbs or scatters the radiation that does make it through the magnetic shield. These two layers of protection are why you can walk outside without wearing lead clothing, why you can live your entire life without developing radiation sickness, why human life evolved on this planet at all. The moon has neither of these protections. The moon's core is small, solid, and generates no significant magnetic field. The moon's atmosphere is so thin it barely exists, approximately 10 trillion times thinner than Earth's atmosphere, essentially a vacuum for all practical purposes. Every single cosmic ray, every solar particle, every high-energy photon that travels toward the lunar surface reaches that surface without any interference whatsoever. The radiation environment on the moon is 200 to 1,000 times more intense than what you experience standing on Earth's surface. Let me make that concrete. In a single year on the moon's surface, an unshielded human would receive a radiation dose roughly equivalent to receiving a chest X-ray every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. This is not about getting a tan. This is about systematic DNA damage at the cellular level, about multiplying cancer risk with every passing month, about slow degradation of every system in your body, and I am not even describing the worst-case scenario yet. Everything I just told you assumes normal background radiation conditions, But the sun is not a constant, steady source of energy. The sun experiences eruptions, coronal mass ejections, solar particle events that dwarf anything in normal conditions. During major solar storms, radiation levels on the lunar surface can spike to thousands of times their already dangerous baseline. An astronaut caught outside during such an event would receive a lethal radiation dose in minutes. Even inside a standard habitat, the dose would be severe enough to cause acute radiation syndrome. The cluster of symptoms that includes nausea, vomiting, hair loss, internal bleeding, immune system collapse, and death. Now, you might be thinking that we can shield against radiation. You might be imagining lead-lined habitats or specialized materials that keep the cosmic death rays at bay. And theoretically, you are right. But the practical reality is devastating to any dream of lunar colonization. To reduce radiation exposure to something approaching Earth normal levels, you would need to surround every habitat with either several meters of lunar regolith, the rocky soil of the moon, or approximately 2 meters of water in every direction. Several meters, not centimeters, meters. This means either burying habitats deep underground, a construction challenge of immense proportions, or maintaining thousands of tons of water shielding, or water that would need to be extracted from the moon's polar regions at extraordinary cost and effort. Every window, every observation port, every solar panel array becomes a radiation vulnerability. Every time someone goes outside, even briefly, they accumulate dose. Every seal failure, every structural crack, every moment of reduced shielding integrity represents potentially lethal exposure. And here is what truly makes radiation the ultimate lunar colonization killer. Even with the best shielding we can theoretically construct, even in the most protected habitat imaginable, cumulative radiation exposure over years and decades would still exceed safe limits. There is no level of shielding that makes 30 years of lunar residence as safe as 30 years of Earth residence. The cosmic background radiation in that region of space simply does not permit it. You can visit the moon and accept elevated radiation risk for a brief period. You cannot live there without accepting that radiation will significantly shorten your life and significantly increase your probability of dying from cancer. But radiation is only attacking you from the outside. Let me tell you about the enemy that attacks from within, the enemy that is the very fabric of the moon itself, the gravitational field that would systematically dismantle your body over months and years of residence. Human beings evolved over millions of years in Earth's gravitational field. Every single aspect of our physiology, from the density of our bones to the strength of our muscles to the pumping capacity of our hearts to the distribution of our bodily fluids, has been precisely calibrated by evolution for life in 1G, 1 Earth gravity. The moon's gravity is 1/6 of Earth's, and while that might sound delightful, imagine bounding along in slow motion like the Apollo astronauts. The long-term health effects are catastrophic. In reduced gravity environments, your skeleton begins to dissolve itself. I am not using metaphorical language here. Your bones literally begin to break down and release their calcium into your bloodstream because your body no longer perceives the need for dense, strong bones. On Earth, every step you take, every movement against gravity, signals your bones to maintain their density. Remove that signal, and your skeleton responds by becoming increasingly porous, increasingly fragile, increasingly similar to the bones of someone with severe osteoporosis. Studies from the International Space Station, where astronauts experience microgravity rather than low gravity, show bone loss rates of 1 to 2% per month. Even if lunar gravity slows this somewhat, extended residence would leave colonists with bones so fragile that a simple fall could result in multiple fractures. And unlike some conditions, this is not fully reversible. Astronauts returning from long-duration missions regain some bone density, but often never return to their pre-flight levels. Spend 5 years on the moon, and you might spend the rest of your life dealing with the skeletal consequences, assuming you ever make it back to Earth at all. Your muscles face a similar fate. The human muscular system requires constant resistance to maintain its mass and function. In 1/6 gravity, walking becomes almost effortless. Lifting becomes trivially easy, and your muscles begin to atrophy at alarming rates. On the International Space Station, astronauts exercise for over 2 hours every single day using specialized resistance equipment, and they still experience significant muscle loss. What exercise regimen would be required for decades of lunar residence? How many hours per day would colonists need to spend fighting their own muscle deterioration? And even with maximal exercise, long-term low-gravity residence would likely leave them too weak to ever function normally on Earth again. Your cardiovascular system faces its own unique devastation. In Earth gravity, your heart works constantly against gravity to pump blood upward to your brain. Remove most of that gravitational resistance, and your heart begins to remodel itself. In studies of astronauts show that the heart literally becomes more spherical, losing some of its elongated shape that evolved for pumping against gravity. Blood pressure dynamics shift as fluids redistribute toward the head, causing facial puffiness, nasal congestion, and, most seriously, increased pressure inside the skull. This increased intracranial pressure has emerged as one of the most significant concerns in space medicine. Astronauts report vision changes during and after long-duration missions, changes that appear to result from pressure effects on the optic nerve. The formal name is Spaceflight-Associated Neuroocular Syndrome, and it represents yet another way that living off Earth degrades the human body. Some researchers believe that extended low-gravity residence could cause permanent vision impairment. But here is where the gravity situation becomes truly horrifying, truly disqualifying for any dream of permanent human settlement. I am talking about children. We have no data whatsoever on human development in low gravity. None. Every astronaut who has ever left Earth has been a fully grown adult with a fully developed skeleton, muscular system, cardiovascular system, and nervous system. What happens when a human being develops from conception through childhood in 1/6 gravity? What happens to bones that have never experienced Earth's gravitational pull during their critical growth phases? What happens to a heart that has never had to pump blood uphill? What happens to a brain that has never processed normal vestibular signals from a body moving through normal gravity? The answer is that nobody knows. And the predictions are terrifying. Children's bones are not just smaller versions of adult bones. They are growing, developing, actively forming their architecture in response to the mechanical stresses they experience. Remove those stresses, and bone development would likely proceed in radically abnormal ways. Children raised on the moon might grow tall, their spines not compressed by Earth-strength gravity, but their bones would be thin, fragile, and structurally inadequate for any environment beyond the one in which they developed. These would be children who could never visit Earth. The planet of their ancestors, the blue marble hanging in their sky, would be permanently forbidden to them because their bodies would be incapable of functioning in its gravity. A trip to Earth would not be a homecoming, it would be a medical emergency, as bones would fracture, hearts would strain, muscles would fail under loads they were never designed to bear. Is this the future we want to create? A colony of human beings permanently exiled from their home world by the very act of being born elsewhere. A generation whose biology has been so altered by their environment that they have become, in a very real sense, a separate species. The ethics of intentionally creating children in conditions known to cause severe developmental abnormalities should give any reasonable person pause, and yet there can be no true colony, no permanent settlement, no multi-generational human presence on the moon without children. A rotating base of adults is not a colony. It is a very elaborate research station. Speaking of those adults, let me tell you about what the moon would do to their minds. Because physical survival is only half the challenge. The psychological pressures of lunar habitation might prove even more destructive than the physical ones. Human beings evolved in rich sensory environments, surrounded by varied landscapes, open skies, changing weather, diverse ecosystems teeming with life. Our psychological well-being depends on factors we rarely consciously acknowledge. Things like being able to walk outside without preparation, experiencing natural light cycles, having the option to simply go somewhere else when we feel constrained. None of these psychological necessities exist on the moon. Every moment of lunar existence would occur inside artificial habitats, behind walls and seals and airlocks that separate fragile human life from instant vacuum death. There is no walking outside to clear your head. There is only putting on a spacesuit, going through depressurization procedures, and conducting a carefully planned excursion in which you remain perpetually aware that one suit failure, one micrometeorite strike, one equipment malfunction stands between you and suffocation. The view from a lunar habitat would be spectacular initially. Earth hanging in the sky, craters stretching to the horizon, the infinite black of space. But humans adapt to spectacular things with remarkable speed. What begins as awe becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes monotonous. And then you are left with the psychological reality of living in a grey, dead, unchanging world, where nothing grows, nothing evolves, nothing lives but you and your fellow prisoners. I use the word prisoners deliberately because that is what lunar colonists would be. They could not leave whenever they wanted. Launch windows, propellant supplies, and mission schedules would dictate when anyone could return to Earth, if ever. They could not go outside freely. The hostile environment would enforce perpetual confinement more effectively than any prison wall. They could not escape each other. The small population of a lunar settlement would mean seeing the same faces, day after day, year after year, with no possibility of meeting new people, making new friends, or simply being among strangers. Studies of isolated populations on Earth provide disturbing previews of what lunar psychology might look like. Antarctic research stations, despite having far more forgiving conditions than the Moon, experience significant interpersonal conflict, depression, sleep disorders, and cognitive changes during winter seasons. Submarine crews, despite serving tours measured in weeks or months rather than years, show psychological strain from confinement. Even the relatively spacious International Space Station, with its views and its communications with Earth and its crew rotations, has experienced interpersonal tensions that required ground intervention. Now multiply the isolation, multiply the confinement, extend the duration from months to years to decades to lifetimes. What emerges is a psychological pressure cooker with no release valve, a social environment where every conflict festers because there is nowhere to escape to, where every annoyance magnifies because there is no variety to provide perspective, where every day is essentially identical to every other day because the environment permits no change. Mental health professionals have identified something called the third quarter phenomenon, a consistent pattern where isolated populations experience their worst psychological states during the third quarter of their confinement period. But this phenomenon assumes a defined endpoint, a return date to anticipate and count down toward. What happens to psychology when there is no endpoint? When lunar residence is permanent? When the third quarter extends to become the entire rest of your life? I believe, and the evidence supports, that permanent lunar habitation would produce rates of depression, anxiety, psychosis, and suicide far exceeding anything seen in Earth populations. The human mind simply did not evolve for such conditions. Our psychology requires hope, variety, growth, and connection to the living world. The Moon offers none of these things, and we have not even discussed what this environment would do to children's psychological development. How does a child form a healthy identity growing up in a bunker, knowing the world outside will kill them instantly? How does adolescent rebellion manifest when rebellion could mean death? How does any normal developmental process proceed when the environment constrains behavior so absolutely? By now, you might be thinking that these problems, while serious, could be solved with enough money and enough technological development. This is the argument of the eternal optimists, the space colony enthusiasts, the techno-utopians who believe that human ingenuity can overcome any obstacle, and I respect that optimism. But let me take you through the economics of lunar colonization, and let you judge for yourself whether the numbers work. As of my knowledge, sending a single kilogram of payload to the lunar surface costs somewhere between $100,000 and $1 million, depending on the launch system and mission architecture. A single kilogram, a litre of water weighs 1 kilogram. A day's food for one person weighs roughly 2 kilograms. A basic spacesuit weighs over 100 kilograms. The life support equipment for a single person weighs hundreds of kilograms more. The habitat modules, the power systems, the scientific equipment, the spare parts, the medical supplies, the construction materials, the radiation shielding, the communication systems, the vehicles, the tools, the redundant backups for everything because failure means death. All of it must either be launched from Earth at these extraordinary costs or manufactured on the Moon with infrastructure that itself must be launched from Earth. The total cost of establishing even a minimal permanent lunar settlement, self-sustaining enough that it would not require continuous resupply from Earth, has been estimated at anywhere from $100 billion to several trillion dollars. That is trillion with a T. For comparison, the entire Apollo program, adjusted for inflation, cost approximately $250 billion, and it only put 12 people on the moon for a few days each. A permanent settlement would require sustained spending at Apollo-level rates for decades. Who would pay for this? Government space agencies operate on political timelines, with budgets subject to the whims of electoral cycles and competing national priorities. The Artemis program, NASA's current initiative to return humans to the moon, has already experienced delays and budget pressures. No government has demonstrated the political will to fund multi-decade trillion-dollar space habitation projects. Private companies operate on profit timelines, with investors expecting returns within years, not generations. What product or service would a lunar colony provide that could justify trillion-dollar infrastructure investments? Lunar mining sounds profitable until you calculate the cost of extracting, processing, and returning resources to Earth. Space tourism sounds promising until you realize that only the wealthiest individuals could afford tickets, and there are only so many wealthy individuals willing to risk their lives for a lunar vacation. The moon produces nothing that Earth needs and cannot obtain more cheaply elsewhere. There is no economic model in which permanent lunar colonization makes financial sense. Every analysis, every projection, every business plan that purports to show profitability relies on technological assumptions that remain science fiction, or demand curves that do not exist. And here is the critical difference between the moon and other ambitious human projects that succeeded despite high costs. When nations built railroads, the railroads enabled commerce that paid for themselves. When companies laid undersea cables, the cables carried communications traffic that generated revenue. When governments funded the interstate highway system, the highways facilitated economic activity worth trillions. Lunar colonization has no comparable value proposition. It is pure cost with no financial return, a permanent drain on whatever entity attempts it, forever. This is why serious space agencies and serious aerospace companies have largely focused their attention elsewhere. Mars, despite being hundreds of times farther away than the moon, actually presents better long-term prospects for human settlement. This might seem counterintuitive, so let me explain why the more distant destination is the more plausible one. Mars has an atmosphere. It is thin, mostly carbon dioxide and not breathable by humans, but it exists. That atmosphere provides some protection against micrometeorites, which burn up before reaching the surface rather than striking it at full cosmic velocity. That atmosphere allows for aerobraking, reducing the fuel needed for landing. That atmosphere contains gases that can be processed into oxygen and rocket propellant using technologies we already understand. Mars has water, lots of it, locked in polar ice caps and subsurface deposits across much of the planet. This water can be extracted and purified far more easily than the trace amounts of ice in permanently shadowed lunar craters. Water means hydrogen and oxygen for breathing and fuel. Water means radiation shielding without launching massive quantities from Earth. Water means the possibility, however distant, of agriculture. Mars has a day-night cycle almost identical to Earth's. A Martian day is 24 hours and 37 minutes, meaning human circadian rhythms can function normally without constant artificial management. The sun rises and sets in patterns our biology recognizes. Light and darkness alternate in familiar proportions. Mars has greater gravity than the moon, 38% of Earth's compared to the moon's 16%. While still too low for ideal human health, this higher gravity would slow bone loss, reduce muscle atrophy, and permit more normal development than the moon's extreme low gravity. It is not enough, but it is better. Mars has the theoretical potential for terraforming, for gradually transforming its environment over centuries to become more Earth-like. The moon has no such potential. Its lack of significant gravity means it cannot hold an atmosphere regardless of what we might try to do. Mars could potentially become habitable, the moon could never. As this is not to say that Mars colonization is easy or imminent or guaranteed. Mars presents its own enormous challenges, and permanent human settlement there remains decades away at minimum. But Mars offers something the moon cannot, a plausible path to genuine long-term human habitation. This is why Elon Musk talks about Mars. This is why NASA's long-term vision focuses on Mars. This is why the moon, despite its proximity, has been relegated to the role of stepping stone rather than destination. The moon will be used. Artemis and its successors will establish a human presence there, likely within the decade. Research stations will be built, perhaps with rotating crews conducting scientific experiments and testing technologies. The far side of the moon, permanently shielded from Earth's radio noise, offers an ideal location for radio telescopes that could detect signals impossible to hear from Earth. The lunar surface could serve as a staging point for missions deeper into the solar system, a place to refuel and resupply before the long journey to Mars or beyond. But these uses do not require permanent habitation. They require something much more like the Antarctic model, rotating crews serving tours of months, not lifetimes, maintaining stations that support scientific and economic activities but that no one calls home. The people who work at Antarctic research stations do not consider Antarctica their home. They consider it their posting, their mission, their temporary residence while they conduct important work. And then they go home, back to the world that supports human life naturally. Back to families and cities and ecosystems and weather. This is the future of human presence on the moon. Not colonies, not cities, not civilizations, outposts, bases, stations, places where humans work for a while before returning to the only home our species has ever truly had. I want to return now to a question I posed at the beginning of our journey together. Why did we stop going to the moon after 1972? The Apollo program landed 6 missions successfully, put 12 humans on the lunar surface, and then simply ended. Apollo 18, 19 and 20 were planned and then cancelled. For over 50 years, no human being has travelled beyond low Earth orbit. The conventional explanation involves politics and budgets. The space race had been won. The Soviet Union was not going to beat America to the moon. The political motivation evaporated, and Congress found other priorities for the money. This explanation is true as far as it goes, but it misses something deeper. The Apollo astronauts came back with more than moon rocks. They came back with a profound understanding of how hostile the lunar environment truly was. They reported the challenges of dust, the difficulties of working in spacesuits, the physical strain of even short lunar excursions. They observed that nothing about the moon suggested it could support extended human presence. The scientific and engineering communities absorbed this knowledge even as the public remained enchanted by the romance of lunar exploration. When budget pressures came, there was no strong scientific voice arguing that we must continue to the moon, that lunar colonization was imminent and vital. The experts understood what the public did not. The moon was a magnificent achievement to reach, but an impossible place to stay. The money flowed elsewhere, not only because political will faded, but because informed professionals recognized that lunar colonization was not a realistic near-term objective. This assessment has not fundamentally changed in 50 years. Technology has advanced enormously. We have new materials, new propulsion concepts, new understanding of space medicine. But the fundamental challenges, radiation and gravity and dust and temperature and vacuum, remain exactly as daunting as they were when the last Apollo astronaut climbed back into his lunar module. No breakthrough has occurred that transforms the moon from hostile to habitable. None appears on the technological horizon. Let me address directly the dreamers, the visionaries, the people who watched science fiction as children and yearned for humanity to become a spacefaring civilization. I am one of you. I grew up watching Star Trek and reading Arthur C. Clarke and imagining a future where humans spread across the cosmos. That dream is not dead. But dreams must eventually confront reality, and reality offers guidance about where our efforts should focus. Every dollar spent planning lunar colonies that will never exist is a dollar not spent on challenges we might actually solve. Every engineer working on impossible lunar habitation schemes is an engineer not working on orbital manufacturing, or Mars mission planning, or asteroid mining, or any of the other space activities that might actually prove viable. Every child inspired by lunar colony fantasies will eventually face the same disappointing reality we have explored tonight, unless we're honest with them about what is actually possible. The moon will never be a human home because physics does not permit it. Not physics as we understand it today that might be revolutionized tomorrow, but fundamental physics that governs how radiation interacts with living tissue, how bones respond to mechanical stress, how temperature differentials affect materials, how vacuum threatens any pressure vessel. These are not engineering problems awaiting clever solutions. These are physical constraints that define the boundary between possible and impossible. But here is what I want you to understand, what I hope stays with you long after this video ends. Either the impossibility of lunar colonization is not a tragedy. It is not a failure of human ambition or a limitation we should mourn. It is simply a fact about the universe we inhabit, and facts are things to be understood and accepted, not resented. The moon is magnificent exactly as it is. It has shaped Earth's climate by stabilizing our axial tilt. It has driven biological evolution through its influence on tides. It has inspired every human culture that ever looked up at the night sky. It offered us our first foothold beyond Earth, our first direct experience of another world, our first proof that humans could travel through space and survive. These gifts are beyond value, and the moon will continue to give. It will host scientific instruments that reveal secrets of the universe. It will serve as a proving ground for technologies we will use elsewhere. It will remain a symbol of what humanity can achieve when we set our minds to seemingly impossible goals. The fact that we cannot live there permanently takes nothing away from what the moon offers. Look up tonight if the sky is clear. Find that familiar face, those light and dark patches that humans have imagined as everything from a rabbit to a woman to a man carrying sticks. See it with new eyes now. See it as what it truly is. A beautiful, desolate, fascinating, deadly world that sits close enough to visit but too harsh to inhabit. See it as a reminder of how precious and improbable Earth is. Every challenge the moon presents, Earth solves effortlessly. Radiation, Earth's magnetic field handles it. Temperature extremes, Earth's atmosphere moderates them. See bone-destroying low gravity? Earth provides exactly the gravitational field human evolution requires. Deadly vacuum? Earth wraps us in a blanket of breathable air. Razor-sharp dust? Earth's water and wind smooth every particle. When you catalogue the moon's hostility, what you're really doing is cataloguing Earth's gifts. This is perhaps the deepest lesson of lunar science. Not that the moon is terrible, but that Earth is miraculous. We live on a world so perfectly suited to our needs that we take its suitability entirely for granted. We complain about weather and earthquakes and diseases, never recognizing that these minor inconveniences occur on a planet that actively maintains the conditions for our existence. The moon makes no such effort. The moon is simply a rock in space, indifferent to whether anything lives or dies upon its surface. Earth is something else entirely, a dynamic system that has sustained life for billions of years and created the conditions for consciousness to emerge and wonder about its place in the universe. When we talk about finding a second home for humanity, about becoming multiplanetary, about ensuring species survival through spreading beyond Earth, we need to be clear-eyed about what this actually means. It does not mean finding another Earth, because there is no other Earth, not in our solar system, likely not within any distance we could ever travel. It means adapting to environments that are, at best, marginally less hostile than the moon. Mars is slightly better. Perhaps certain asteroids or moons of Jupiter and Saturn offer specific advantages. But none of them offer what Earth offers. None of them want us the way Earth wants us. This is why the most important space activity humanity can undertake is not colonization, but understanding. We should explore the moon thoroughly, not to prepare for colonies, but to learn its secrets. We should send rovers and orbiters and eventually human visitors to Mars, not primarily to prepare for settlements, but to understand the planet's history and search for signs of past or present life. We should study asteroids and comets to understand the history of our solar system, and to prepare for the possibility of dangerous impacts. We should peer at exoplanets around distant stars to understand whether life is common or rare in the universe. This scientific exploration is humanity's true destiny in space, at least for the foreseeable future. We are the universe becoming conscious of itself, developing the ability to understand our cosmic context. That is a magnificent purpose, a purpose worthy of our resources and our brightest minds. The fantasy of escape, of abandoning Earth's problems by fleeing to other worlds, is neither achievable nor desirable. I want to tell you something that might seem strange coming in a video about why the moon cannot be our home. I want to tell you why this knowledge should fill you with wonder rather than disappointment. The universe is vast beyond human comprehension. It contains hundreds of billions of galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, many of those stars orbited by planets, all of it spanning distances so great that light itself, the fastest thing in existence, takes billions of years to cross them. In all of that immensity, in all of that cosmic grandeur, we have found exactly one place where human beings can live without extraordinary technological intervention. One place: Earth. This either makes Earth cosmically rare and precious, a jewel of habitability in an endless hostile void, or it reveals the limitations of our current exploration and understanding. Either way, the appropriate response is not disappointment that we cannot easily colonize other worlds. The appropriate response is profound gratitude and determined stewardship for the world we have. If the moon teaches us nothing else, let it teach us this. Home is not something to escape from, but something to protect. We will not solve Earth's problems by fleeing to other worlds, because other worlds have problems far worse than anything Earth presents. Climate change is serious, but the moon's thermal extremes are incomprehensibly worse. Pollution is dangerous, but lunar dust is incomparably deadlier. Political conflicts are disturbing, but they occur against a backdrop of breathable air, drinkable water, and survivable temperatures that the moon cannot provide. The dream of space colonization, properly understood, should not be a dream of escape. It should be a dream of extension, of expanding humanity's presence and knowledge while maintaining our fundamental connection to the world that made us. We can build research stations on the moon and Mars. We can construct orbital habitats around Earth. We can send robots to explore every corner of the solar system. We can point our telescopes at distant galaxies and listen for signals from other civilizations. All of this we can do. And all of this we should do, because it expands human knowledge and human capability. But through it all, for the foreseeable centuries if not forever, Earth remains home. Not because we lack ambition, not because we lack technology, not because we lack vision, but because Earth is where life evolved to thrive, and no engineering shortcut can replicate 4 billion years of biological adaptation. The moon will never be a human home. This statement is not pessimism. It is not defeatism. It is not a lack of imagination. It is the clear-eyed assessment of a reality that becomes more evident the more deeply we examine it. The moon is too irradiated for human biology. Its gravity is too weak for human development. Its dust is too dangerous for human lungs. Its temperature swings are too extreme for sustainable habitation. Its lack of resources makes self-sufficiency impossible. Its psychological isolation would break human minds. Its economic value does not justify the cost required. Every serious analysis reaches the same conclusion. The moon is a fantastic destination for brief visits, an excellent location for research installations, a potentially useful staging point for missions elsewhere, but not a place where humans can live in any meaningful sense of that word. The people who tell you otherwise are either uninformed about the science or selling you something. The visionary billionaires planning lunar colonies are playing to public imagination, not physical reality. The press releases announcing habitation timelines are public relations, not engineering projections. I hope this video has given you a framework for understanding not just the moon, but space habitation in general. The same analysis applied to any potential off-Earth home will reveal similar patterns. Some challenges more severe, some less, but always the fundamental truth that no place we know compares to Earth for human habitability. Mars is better than the moon, but still incomparably worse than Earth. Venus is far worse than the moon. Mercury is a radiation-blasted furnace. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn offer intriguing possibilities, but present their own tremendous challenges. Every option is difficult. Every option requires accepting degraded conditions. No option is good enough to call home. We should explore all of it. We should study all of it. We should learn everything we can about every world within our reach. But we should do this with clear eyes about what we're doing and why. We are expanding human knowledge. We are satisfying human curiosity. We are developing technologies that will have applications we cannot yet imagine. We are not for the foreseeable future finding anywhere else for humans to live in large numbers across generations. The moon, our closest cosmic neighbor, the world humans have actually walked upon, the romantic symbol of what we might achieve in space, will never be a human home, and that is okay. That is not a failure. That is simply the universe being what it is, vast and hostile and magnificent, while Earth remains what it is, rare and precious and irreplaceable. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. I hope you see the moon differently now, not with disappointment that it cannot be colonized, but with appreciation for what it is and what it teaches us about our place in the cosmos. If this video changed your understanding, share it with someone who still imagines lunar cities and needs to understand the science. Subscribe for more explorations of the universe's truths, even when those truths challenge comfortable assumptions. And leave a comment telling me what you think humanity's real future in space should be, now that you understand the constraints we actually face. Next time you look up at the moon, remember everything we discussed. Remember the radiation that would slowly kill you, the gravity that would dissolve your bones, the dust that would shred your lungs, the temperatures that would destroy any structure, the vacuum that would suffocate you in seconds, the psychological prison of permanent confinement, the economics that can never work, the medical emergencies that can never be addressed, the children who can never develop normally, the fundamental incompatibility between human life and lunar conditions. Remember all of that, and then feel something unexpected. Gratitude. Gratitude that you live on a world where none of those threats apply. Gratitude that you can walk outside without a spacesuit, breathe without filtering systems, drink water that falls from the sky, eat food that grows in soil, feel gravity that keeps your bones strong and your blood flowing correctly. Experience weather and seasons and the endless variety of Earth's environments. The moon teaches us what we have by showing us what we lack elsewhere. And what we have here on Earth is everything. Everything a human being needs to thrive. Everything our species requires to continue. Everything. The moon will never be a human home. Earth already is. That is the truth about space colonization. That is the scientific reality beneath the science fiction dreams. That is why, 50 years after we first walked on another world, we have not returned to stay, and why the next 50 years will not change that fundamental calculus. The moon was never meant to be our home. It was meant to show us with crystalline clarity how precious our actual home truly is. Look up at the moon tonight. Marvel at its beauty. Remember that humans stood upon its surface, and then look around at the world you actually inhabit, the air you breathe, the water you drink, the gravity you feel, and understand that you're already home. The only home you will ever have, the only home you will ever need, protected accordingly. Now, I want to leave you with one final thought, something to carry with you, not just when you look at the moon, but when you think about humanity's future in general. We are a young species with a long future ahead of us, if we are wise enough to secure it. The challenges we face, climate change, resource depletion, political instability, technological disruption, are real and serious, but they are challenges faced on a habitable world, challenges that can be solved with the same ingenuity that took us to the moon in the first place. The people who dream of escaping Earth's problems by colonizing space have the equation exactly backwards. Space does not offer escape from problems. Space is nothing but problems. Problems so extreme they make anything on Earth look trivial by comparison. Our future is not out there, waiting for us on barren rocks orbiting distant stars. Our future is here, on the one world that can support us, the one world we are capable of stewarding into a sustainable long-term relationship with human civilization. The moon will never be a human home because the moon cannot be a human home. Physics forbids it. Biology forbids it. Economics forbids it. Psychology forbids it. Every branch of science, every field of engineering, every aspect of human experience points to the same conclusion. We evolved on Earth. We belong on Earth. And Earth is where our species will either thrive or perish. Choose to help it thrive. Choose to protect what cannot be replaced. And choose to appreciate what the moon has taught us about the extraordinary gift we already possess. That gift is Earth, our home, the only one we will ever have. The moon will never be a human home, but it has given us something perhaps more valuable, the knowledge of how precious our actual home truly is. And for that gift, that perspective, that cosmic education and gratitude, we should thank our silver neighbor every time we look up at the night sky. The moon will never be a human home, and now you know why. Take that knowledge and do something with it. Appreciate Earth. Protect Earth. Understand that there is nowhere else to go. You are already home. Make it count. End.